What's up, YouTube? Welcome to our podcast, Books and Brews. I'm Peter Lung. Today I'm joined by...
Adrian Curtis.
Angelina Martinez.
Alyssa Zwiener.
And we have a new person on our podcast. Get it up for...
Elijah. Do I say my last name too? Oh, Kid. Huh.
Today we'll be going over part 2 of the Mistborn series that we've been talking about. This is a continuation of our last episode on the podcast. Today, for our brews, we're actually not at 1820 Coffee House. We're actually at our friend's house in
Algeria.
Their location and latitude is... But anyways, we're at a new location, so if anything sucks, leave it in the comments below, and we can tell the landlord. For drinks today, we actually are not at the coffee house, so we had to make our own drinks. Today I'm drinking actually our homemade boba red bean milk tea.
Honeydew, no milk tea.
Cherry vanilla Pepsi.
And?
You do have another drink.
I've already drank it, actually.
Oh.
Wow, you drank that
ate
fast.
everything else too?
I am drinking a regular Pepsi and a honeydew milk tea.
I'm drinking the same as Peter. I have a red bean milk tea with tapioca, pearls, homemade.
And then food too? Or not?
No.
I already ate all of my food.
I actually haven't eaten a single bite, so today we have Red Dragon
Oh, I do also have some
sushi, sponsored by Takara Ramen. Was this good? It was alright.
I inhaled it so fast I didn't even taste.
Okay, anyways, so today we'll be going over chapters 9 through 12, which is the first half of part 2. Who wants to start us off?
No, I read it, but the thing is I read it so long ago
Yeah.
that I barely remember.
I actually didn't read it. I had someone read it for me, which was
Oh,
those two.
yeah, in the
Oh,
car.
yes.
Peter and Adrian
This-
read it for me.
I
while was driving.
actually read chapter 9 3 times.
You just loved it that much?
No,
Or-
I actually the third time I was like, oh my god, I'm so
Does anyone have that
tired of
page
reading this
starts?
chapter. So chapter 9, we see Vin. She is more in tune with her powers. We see her actively in a hunt against a mysterious figure, who we later learn is Kelsier. We learn that there has been a time skip of about a couple months. We also get to learn more about Sazed, and Vin gets a haircut. That's pretty much
Say
it.
Z is the proper pronunciation?
Yeah, I was pronouncing it Salad.
I was pronouncing it Sazed. What's wrong
Okay.
with that? Hey, what's wrong with that?
As in the verb to stays?
Yeah.
I says,
I
you
says.
says.
We all Sazed.
Oh, I pronounced it, and then we'll flash the word.
Yeah.
Push
Like,
editing.
This is just
Wow,
more work
Vin.
for you, really.
Personally, I'm not a fan of time skips. It's my least favorite trope that any writer does. I find it a little lazy, actually. I just didn't like the whole mysterious figure. We all knew it was Kelsier. And I think it was actually more boring for them to say, oh, it's Kelsier. They should have just said it was Kelsier the entire time, I feel like.
If you know Mistborn, name 3 Mistborns.
Vin, Kelsier. Ooh, guys?
I know the third one.
Sorry, spoilers. And I will say his real name right now.
Farty McPoop Pants.
But I do
So
actually
just
know.
say a random name and then we'll bleep it.
I actually do know the real name.
Okay, we'll say a random
Well,
one.
I don't-
It's not the true one, so we don't know.
Oh, so okay.
It's Kelsier.
It's Kelsier. He's gonna kill himself.
Whoa.
He's
Oh,
gonna
sewer
unalive
slide. He's gonna
himself.
sewer slide.
So you were unalive.
He's gonna
I'm going to
unalive
sewer
himself. Okay, but yeah, no, I actually kind of disagree with you there, Adrian, because I think number one, I think time skips are, if they're utilized well, they can be a really good story progression tool. Also, not a trope. That's not the word you should use. Just wanna.
Book expert over here.
Yeah, I know. I took one literature class in college, so I would know.
We only have so much paper here. It's how thick this book is.
I will say, okay, the only reason I didn't really like this time skip is because I felt like I wanted to see more of Vin getting a hand on like her elementic powers, which we kind of missed. And it's like, I guess it's kind of the point because they're like, oh, she's a natural, but
Well, I think it's less about that and it's more about we have to, whenever you're writing a story, you really have to take into account what part
Why?
of the story you want to focus on to tell what you're wanting to tell. And obviously the story in this book is about overcoming oppression and systematic issues, you know what I mean? And so like it would be more interesting to have a whole chapter of like a montage style of her getting used to her powers, but when it comes to storytelling, I think that it would be redundant and just a waste of paper. If this was turned into like a show or like a visual media, then yes, it would make sense for there to be like a
Maybe.
I just
Maybe.
personally find it a little boring when the protagonist is shown to be a prodigy at something that is supposed to be challenging.
But it's been several months at this
I agree with
point.
that.
But
Was
it's
it several
also
months? I thought it
the
was like
It was a couple of months, yeah.
yeah, it was
Yeah.
like 2-3 months. Yeah, I thought it was like 2 months.
Yeah.
But I agree. Kind of. I do agree that it's a little boring. That oh my gosh, the main character is the main character, and they're prodigy and everything, and they don't have to like work for it. But I did like the time skip. I mean, we kind of saw her getting a handle on it, and I think we got the gist of it. And I also was watching a video, and the creator like wrote so much, and he cut so much out that I think it was necessary.
We'll link to the video down below.
No, it won't.
yeah, I was just gonna say like, what would be even the point of showing her? I mean, it gets maybe it might flesh out a character a little bit more, but like that's kind of not the point of the story. Is
The only thing I will add on one is that in part 1 we end it with her being very unsure about her powers and kind of afraid when she's jumping over the walls and whatnot. And it's kind of like, yeah, she jumped, so now she isn't afraid, and she's a master now.
to be fair though, she hasn't learned all the moves yet.
That's true.
She hasn't mastered all the, or yeah, she's only done the basic one.
It's
So in
very
an
cute.
anime, actually, like I guess it makes sense because like this would be like the montage portion. If you think about like,
Which would
this is
take, like,
probably like
probably
in
5
between 2
seconds.
seasons of the anime, or you know, like it's separation of the parts.
If this was made into an anime,
Chef's kiss.
Chef kiss.
So actually, one thing that happens at the end of the chapter is that Sazed and Vin talk about a religion, actually multiple religions. I think last time we also talked about self-insert characters. I actually want to say that Sazed is a self-insert character for Brandon Sanderson because as we discussed in the second episode of this podcast, Brandon Sanderson did go to BYU. He was a Mormon. He also wrote this book during his undergraduate, or maybe it was his graduate degree at BYU. You know, if you're going to school for theology, like you have to be thinking about religion all the time. So, and Sazed, that's Sazed as a character as a whole, because like you said, he kind of studies all the religions and he kind of believes in all the religions simultaneously at once.
But I feel like that would be against the Mormon ideology.
I think Sazed or whatever, he is kind of like a expositionist tool. He was talking about how
Even though
they're like feared by the Lord ruler, that he like tried to erase them or like tried to force them into servitude to him, like solely because they know so much about the past world and past religions and things like that.
So spoilers, actually.
Okay.
Huge bomb.
And I just now took it in my pants.
Well, I actually do know something that like is super spoilers that I feel like could help you out on that one.
You have this like holier than thou attitude, and that needs to stop.
Okay. Oh, but what I was trying to get to, I'm starting to think, okay, because I have 2 bones to pick. Male authors writing female main characters have always irked me a little bit. And at first I was like, maybe the Vin can be like one of the exceptions, right? But then in the chapter when she gets like her haircut and stuff, and she's like, I'm starting to look like a girl. And like I get the whole like, I'm like,
Voluptuous
what is
author.
happening? And like, it's giving, I don't know what it's giving, but it's not giving something like fun I enjoy. And I get the understanding behind it and being like, oh, women in the Undercity are like treated as either like prostitutes or whatever. Like they're not regarded as anything of high value. Do you know how to lay down yet? Rose said no. It seemed like this author was kind of trying his best to write things that were outside of his perspective, like a female main character, this person who's like super open about all religions. Whenever she's like, what religion do you believe in? He's like, all of them. Well, they're all contradictory, aren't they? And he's like, yeah, of course. And so it's like kind of like in the Mormonism, when a lot of people who do leave the Mormonism church, they're like, oh, all these contradictions, we're in the Mormonism church and da-da-da-da. Like I felt like people who were preaching Mormonism never really actually exercised it. And so anytime I would like fail at one of the many rules, I'd feel awful not knowing that everybody else was failing on purpose. Da-da-da-da.
Are we gonna get canceled by the Mormons?
What are they gonna do? Not drink coffee at us?
Knock on our doors.
Are they even allowed to have the internet?
No, that's Jehovah's
The
Witness.
Jehovah's.
That's Amish.
Okay, yeah. Oops, sorry.
No, actually, Mormons are not allowed to have coffee.
That's what I said. They're gonna not drink coffee at us.
What did you say?
I said they're not allowed to have the internet, but they're also not allowed to have coffee, so they
are
can't
not
even
allowed coffee.
touch our
Well, they're not allowed to
podcast.
have hot drinks, I believe, and that's why they started dirty sodas. to get
So
caffeine.
iced coffee.
I don't know if they can have iced coffee though.
I
So
think
then
we're
it's
showing
not
our
the hot
It's
ignorance.
a caffeine thing.
I thought it was a caffeine.
Well,
thing.
they can have caffeine because they
I think it,
created dirty sodas to get. Like,
no,
to
I think
have
that's
caffeine.
the controversy of it is that a lot of sodas do have
You
caffeine.
shouldn't do this when you're talking because
I think it's something about.
sounds bad.
I think it's something about the cold. I think it's something about the cold. Like they can't have hot drinks. Look it up.
Google right here. This is the answer.
And right here is the answer.
Right here, the AI response.
No, not the A or review. Scroll a bit more.
I will say that for the note that I put on this chapter was Alaskan religion mentioned? Question mark. Trugalism. I thought it was I really liked it, and I was really sad that Vin didn't like it.
Pretty much.
We learn from Kelsier when he's having his talk with Sazed that terrace men, they're really strong or powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking about it. I was like, because he says, when Vin asks, how do you know all these religions and how do you memorize them? He doesn't say, oh, I've studied them or, oh, I have them written down. He says, I have methods. And I thought that was really weird to phrase it that way. Like, very open-ended and, like, secretive. So I feel like superpower?
I think he's super powerful.
Yeah, because they get trained at birth, right? So I just think he has lots of skills, and then they probably are, since they're like a different like sub race or whatever, that they probably are like genetically stronger.
I think if the Lord Ruler hears you, you're probably pretty strong.
Yeah,
Well, I thought the whole fear thing was because
religion.
of the knowledge of before him. Because the whole point of like the Lord Ruler, it seems so far, is that he is God.
Mhm.
Like, you know.
Or part of God.
Yeah.
To
Part of
object
it.
to that line of thought, like, we see when Cesar is talking about it, the Lord Ruler doesn't really fear other people believing in other gods because he doesn't see that as a problem. He just sends his Steel Inquisitors after them.
But that's the thing is, so a lot of obviously what this author pulls from is real life experience, right? Or like real life things, right?
Yeah.
Systematic oppression, slavery, da. Like religion was used as a tool to control the slaves. They were given Bibles, but they weren't taught to read, and they were like preached to by like people who were catering to their own agenda. And they didn't want them to have their own organization of religion because that can give them a lot of hope and a lot of power in their own selves, which can lead to united rebellion. So I think that that's the whole idea of Lord Ruler not wanting the keepers to like be not out of his realm of control, because they can instill hope in the Ska and inspire rebellion. That's what I got from it, at least.
I agree.
Can we talk about how in chapter 11, the little blurb at the beginning basically confirms that the speaker in these little pre-chapter blurbs are the Lord Ruler?
You think so?
Yeah, absolutely. Chapter 11, they talks about the terracemen and how basically they're too powerful.
And I said
they
that
should be oppressed.
y'all don't know that.
So
Y'all don't know this, but whenever I hung out with some people in this room outside of a camera in a coffee shop in
Somalia.
I told them I thought it was Lord Ruler.
because you watched our podcast episodes and we already talked about it.
Actually, no. I had that thought completely besides y'all.
I
And
s-
then I watched it and y'all like were like, "Oh, I
Yeah,
agree." And I was like,
yeah.
"Yeah, I agree."
Totally.
I still think it is more than one person. Just kind of based off. I have my methods, is what I'll
I
say.
have my message.
Bro, it's because he looked it up and he's cheating.
I didn't look it up.
Because he looked up and he's cheating and he cheats.
I will
He's
say
a cheater.
I have my methods.
It's called cheating.
Hold on.
He's a keeper in.
I have
Yeah, kill this guy right now. Oh
Methods.
no,
Press this
unalive
guy.
this guy.
I have methods.
He did read
I
that
hate it
chapter
here.
3 times. Chapter 10.
Oh, I thought
'Cause
chapter
it also-
10 was so interesting. Actually,
Chapter 10 was a lot of fun. We got to see Breeze.
Oh, yeah.
And she got to see how Mistines are sort of more. They only have the one thing they can do, but they're really good at that one thing that they can do.
Professional.
Breeze's job
so smart.
at that moment, and all of his
Cheerleaders.
suitors, they are planted in the crowd, and he sends out these little messages via whatever the waitresses are wearing. That's what emotion they're supposed to invoke or soothe. It's really interesting to see kind of how Breeze also sees his powers from maybe more of like a moral perspective, even though maybe it is still a little skewed. But he does bring up a good point whenever he's mentioning that, you know, this isn't being able to sway people of their emotions isn't necessarily unique to Allomancers. Everyone does it in their everyday lives, and he's just at an advantage.
I really liked it how Breeze was monologuing the entire thing. How like he was like they need to feel enraged at the mistreatment that they've been feeling, and they need to feel like curiosity at what Kelsier was like speaking about, and just how the way he was monologuing it was very intriguing to me.
I have to agree. I actually really like. I had some predispositions about Breeze, and I kind of saw him in a new light at this chapter, seeing how he operates. It was very much kind of, this is my job, and I take a very serious kind of vibe. My favorite part was like, this is the emotion we need right now. And he's like, okay, soothers, I need you to get rid of this emotion, because that's not going to do us any good. Get rid of this. Rioters, we need more of this. I was like, damn, okay, Breeze, I see you.
Yeah. I like Breeze. I think he's silly.
I also really liked how Vin was willing to turn off her like protection. Mm-hmm. She was like, it is so subtle. Like I could barely tell it was happening.
I think this is it bears a nice parallel to like the pushing and pulling, because when I was listening and kind of learning about the metals and their powers and allomancies for the first time, when I got to those, like you could very well see that to master the art of pushing and pulling, especially when you use it for flying, it takes a lot of like skill and understanding like your balance. But for something like emotion, it's like, well, Vin was already using it before even understanding anything about allomancy, and so to me it kind of felt like it was a little easier to like utilize. It's like, oh, you just got to push, and then you have someone kind of persuading or like kind of joining your cause. But you can kind of see like it's a lot parallel to this pushing and pulling in terms of like how intricate and how like there's so much stuff to master. So I think that was pretty interesting.
Oh yeah, like the way he was explaining it, like if you push too hard, like this could happen, or like stuff like that.
Yeah, and he says like at one point you're not just feeling one emotion; you have like little emotions, and they kind of vary in how intense they feel, and you can kind of soothe and riot, you know, them accordingly to get. So I think it's I thought it was very interesting. I mean, yeah. There was also a part about so Ham actually is a philosophy major apparently, because he does go into this ethical debate about whether it's good to be rising against the Lord, and I was thinking he does have a lot of points, right? Like, are they doing a good thing? I mean, obviously we're kind of outside people, so we kind of think everything that the Lord Ruler does is bad and everything that the rebellion does is good. But on this moral playground where you can't control what's right and what's wrong, like only one person, which is the Lord Ruler, really is the one controlling in the current state. Like, I don't know, morally, is that, can we use the word moral? I don't know. There needs to be a new word to define morality in terms of what we perceive it out as a bystander and what it is defined in the world of the Lord Ruler.
I had this really cool thought about the book. So it always, like Ham said, like, who are we to decide what's right and wrong? Like, we're going against the Lord Ruler. We think they're bad because they enslaved the Ska, but like, who are we to decide? Right. And I was thinking, like, we always are skewed with our perspective based on like who the storyteller is, right? Because in every story, like every person's story, they're not the villain, right? That whole thing, like the Lord Ruler, I'm starting to think maybe started out as somebody who is objectively good based on the excerpts, but that's also, you know, assuming that the excerpts at the beginning of each chapter is the Lord Ruler, and bro's immortal, so like way before whatever all this happened, he existed and favors the noble families. Like, who's to say that he started out as someone quote unquote good and then became sort of evil as he, you know, gained more power? And then it's kind of like brought up again, the idea of power. Whenever Kelsier is like talking to Sazed about religions, and he's like, tell me one about with power. And Sazed is like, power? Religion doesn't really have a lot of power. Like, there's not a lot of power-based religions. And then he brings up Jaiism, which I think is an allegory for Christianity or Christian branches. The whole moral question, I think, is about like perspective, because you can twist any story to make one side morally good and morally bad. Like, you can justify what the Lord Ruler is doing to the Ska by saying, well, the Ska were just a bunch of bad people, and the nobles were good people, but like years and centuries of oppression and privilege has kind of like flipped the script, because people who experience privilege all their lives will view equality as oppression. Like, they're not getting treated better than other people, so now they're getting worse treatment, quote unquote, to them, even though it's like same level treatment. So it could be like that idea where everyone who was on opposite sides were their respective moral good, moral bad, and then because of how everything just progressed, it became the opposite.
I think he put that in a way more elegant way than Ham did, because Ham in the book was like, well, Lord Ruler makes all the rules, so we're rebelling him, so that technically makes us the bad guys. And it felt like baby's first philosophy question ever. It's like, well, if someone puts a bad rule, are we right to turn around that bad rule? Aren't we the bad guys now?
Yeah.
I will say, I think the point that Ham was trying to make, which I didn't really agree with him, but I think the point he was trying to make is whenever you go into like this rebellion, they kind of are uprooting a system that has a sense of order, not necessarily morally correct, but it has like, there's a society and there's a balance that has been achieved, whether it's good or not. And the question he's posing is it right for us to destroy that if it's bringing somewhat order to the final empire? And especially whenever you think about like the motives of specifically not the like actual rebellion, but the thieves in the group, they're just after the ATM. They don't care what happens after the empire collapses. Their priority isn't what happens to the Ska or the noble people after the rebellion succeeds or fails. They want the ATM, and that's it.
I guess
So
Yenin does. Yenin kind of cares, I think.
Kelsier and what's his name? The guy I like? Clubs?
I don't think Kelsey
I was
really.
talking about the Ska rebellion.
Yemen?
Yeah,
I'm not-
I feel like he's kind of, but you're right about
Yeah.
the other guy. The other guys are kind of just like in it because Kelsier is in it.
They're like,
So, like,
if Yedin succeeds and he can establish order, then great. But if not, we have our ATM.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah.
And so I think that's kind of what Ham was trying to tell them. He's like, is it right for us to do this? Are we doing it kind of like for the right reasons? Like, yes, we're getting rid of a system of oppression, but if we're not
yeah, but that's
prepared,
not what he says. He doesn't put
He
it
doesn't
like
put it
that.
that way, you're right.
Yeah, it's
I
kind
guess
of
it's
like
kinda, yeah.
it wasn't a very good, and he didn't have much. He didn't have very long to talk about his moral
they
dilemma.
did
He
just
wanted to
shoot
bring
him
up-
out of them.
because he did like Ham or Breeze definitely did like put him down. Like, no, I don't want to talk about this with you right now. But like, it's just you guys are putting it way better than the way Ham
So
is putting
Breeze and
it.
Ham though,
Definitely.
Breeze and him are definitely exploring each other's bodies.
they are, because the way
Do your worst, Daddy.
Breeze the entire time was like, I don't want any part of this, and then literally gets it. He's like, well, actually, blah 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 blah, and he's like, I just want to make sure you have the right facts.
Mhm.
Actual quote. I
They're
will
literally
say,
an old married couple.
off topic, but back to the soothing and the rioting. I did want to say that Breeze does bring in some, like, points out some of the limitations on it, because at the end of the meeting, Vin brings up the point, won't these feelings disappear once they leave? And he says, yes, but that's not the point. We're creating a memory, an emotion that they'll, every time they think about this, they'll recall.
So we also learned that they're kind of behind schedule in terms of recruiting. So does anyone have any predictions? How do you think they're going to get to the quota, apparently? Because there is a quota. And if they do not get that quota, there's no book.
I don't have a prediction, but I do want to say only a year.
Yeah.
Only a year. They could have chosen so many other times. They had, dude. They didn't have to choose a year. They could have chosen 5 years, which I think would have been more. But that makes me think that there is a hard deadline that Kelsier knows about that nobody else knows about, and that's why he said a year.
I think that they think they would lose people if they're like, yeah, we're gonna do this in about like 5 years, whatever. Like they have to do it like in the year to like keep people's hopes up and like to get people riled for the cause.
Plus, Kelsier's getting paid for this, so like if it was longer than that, they probably need more money.
I guess that's true, but also like when it comes to training an army, I think gathering it and consistently training for like 5 years, like maybe 3 to 5, I think that it would still work out. But
you also have to keep in mind, the longer you keep an operation enrolled,
the more likely
Yes,
it is to get
and
voted
that
out.
is actually the explicit reason that they say that they only have that much time. In chapter 8, Kelsier says, the longer we take, the more risk we have that the ministry susses out our growing army in the caves.
Oh, that's true, yeah, because they
And
don't have a lot of caves and like
at
transportation.
the end of chapter 10, they found their old base.
Yeah.
The ministry.
True.
Dude, oh yeah, the whole thing with the Steel Inquisitor, that guy,
Just rip those pieces to shreds.
and it was like they were like talking about like, whoa, this is crazy. It's like a freaking lion came through here.
Yeah, that's
That's chapter 11 though. We're still on chapter 10.
So, yeah. So at the end of chapter 10, Ham comes in
There you go.
and it has been informed that Vin's old crew's hideout had been exposed, and the Steel Inquisitors had came and slaughtered everyone brutally.
Brutally.
Everybody say brutally.
brutal.
Brutally. Chapter 11, we see in detail what happens to people that cross the ministry. We see that they were not successful in getting the tail off of Vin, obviously. Or at least maybe there was someone that betrayed them in their crew. As the Steel Inquisitors are able to find a somewhat well-hidden hideout and slaughter everybody inside. Also see Doxson informs Kelsier of where Kamen had been hoboing around, but he wasn't really hoboing because he was physically maimed, yes, disabled by the old crew. Doxson confirms where Kamen has been peddling around, and Kelsier goes to go check and sees him hanged. And hung and tortured. Strung, hung, and tortured.
With a hook.
And I'm not talking about his D. When I say hung. Oh. Wait a minute.
Hung means you have a big cock.
We see Karen.
As in chicken.
Yeah, as in chicken. And we can say that because it's slang. Like,
And we also see that Vin
Followed.
Kelsier. Kind of doesn't trust. Well,
She was just curious. Yeah. She wanted to know what he was up to. He doesn't take her out on his like mansion raids, so like she wanted to be a part of it.
and we see that Vin is actually relieved that Kamen is dead. Happy,
She's
satisfied.
like,
Yeah.
yes, finally.
I mean, that was her abuser.
And it makes sense.
Yeah.
That
Makes
was her
sense.
abuser, yeah.
I like how in the hideout she was like shocked, like, oh my gosh, like this is crazy, this is brutal, and it's brutal out here. And she was like, but none of these guys were my friends.
Yeah,
and
like
Ham was like, that's crazy.
Yeah,
Kinda
and she
harsh.
was like, yeah, he wasn't even my friend. And the guy and bro was like, okay. I think that is actually a really good thing to touch on, though. Like, whenever you are in such a place like that even people, because she got
Fat
betrayed
ass.
by that guy who she said might have been close to her being her friend, because when she was like, hey, let's leave. Yeah,
Ulef,
Ulef,
yeah.
whatever. What's the snowman's name?
Olaf. Yeah.
I imagine that's what he looks like too.
But I also really liked Sazed's prayer in the corner that he did.
yeah.
I thought that was like sweet. Like he was just praying and she's like, what are you doing? Like obviously like she didn't know that was a prayer. Like, come on girl, get with it.
I really
mean-
liked that I don't know who said it, but they're like, how do you know that's the right one to say? And he was just like, it just felt like it.
It just seemed appropriate. No, actually, I think that's like a really good point about like if would they even know what prayers are? Because like
Oh yeah, yeah.
because like the Lord Ruler doesn't answer prayers. He doesn't care. He
Yeah.
literally you could literally die and he wouldn't care if you're a Ska. Like if you're a nobleman, he just grants them what like powers or whatever.
Yeah, it gives them a little sliver of ATM.
Yeah.
Honestly, we don't really know what
It gives them the power.
the religion looks like. Very
But
much.
you
don't,
can
but-
be given power that has been told.
Because
That
I thought the whole
theorized.
justification
No.
of the Mistborn was that it was because or like whenever the Lord Ruler was first in power, he favored the people who were next to him, which were the noblemen, and granted them the power allegedly.
Well, I just remember they were talking about like not the Steel Inquisitors, but the one below. I forget, they start with an A or something.
Oh,
The obligators.
The obligators, and how like all of them are like can like tell when people are using powers. They're like, I don't know if they just hire people who are using those powers or if they like give them those
I
powers.
think it was mentioned that they're trained to know
detect
when
it.
someone's playing with their emotions.
Yeah.
Because like Vin was in a skilled soother. It's probably hard and subtle, but she was able to notice that her emotions were being played with, even if it was subtle. I think I don't think the obligators are given powers, but we do think